Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show, episode number 134. We're rocking along, and wow, we've been doing this a while, Anton. um, just want to remind everyone to uh, share where you're joining us from, and we certainly want to hear your comments and questions as we go along. And so, Anton, you want to open up our topic for us today?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Today, we'll be talking about behavior change, basically discussing, some of the approaches that are people taking, where society's pushing us, whether it's good for us, whether, it doesn't make sense for us, and really how much it relates to stress and how much stress that creates. So before we get started, type in, I think Kevin might have already said it, but where you're joining from, let us know like what city, country. Kevin's really good at giving shout outs, but also I would love to have your opinion. Like, what does it take to change behavior? What is the, inputs? What are the inputs that we need to put in as people in order to get the output of the change in behavior that we're looking for? I mean, I've been doing this for a while. My girlfriend always tells, when she watches the show all the time, Kevin, and she says we need to
Ah,
introduce ourselves. Like, she's like, well, you guys need to introduce yourselves and tell them why people should listen to. I was like, yeah, I just forget that, people don't always recognize, who we are and what we do. But, I'll introduce myself first. I'm a health coach. I've been a health coach for a long time that became, a life coach and an executive coach and you name it, many different hats after the initial health coach that I wore. But for over a decade, I've coached, over 1,000 people in different areas of health, whether it be nutrition, whether it be exercise, whether it be weight loss, their blood work, you name it. I've done all that kind of stuff. And the reason I care so much about stress management is because my dad passed away at a very early age because he wasn't taking care of himself. He wasn't really prioritizing himself. He prioritized his work, and he literally worked himself to death. Kev, why don't you introduce yourself?
all right. Yeah, it's a good point your girlfriend's made that might help. Well, I am I guess really, I'm a life coach, uh, and I coach in other areas, but in one way or another, they're all related to life. And I've been doing that for a long time, probably started about 20 plus years ago. And, um, and I am a teacher at heart and found that passion a number of years ago as well. And I currently do have my own company and actually consult and coach and speak. And I have a passion related to stress, partly because of my respect and appreciation for Anton. And but we share a vision for human sustainability, and stress is a real issue in terms of human sustainability. I train leadership, and one of the challenges that a lot of your field and frontline leaders face right now is that they are stressed ongoing, and it's a big concern about them burning out. So, a little bit about me. So, change behavior change. What are your thoughts there, Anton? You're kind of more the expert there.
Yeah, of course. One thing, the reason we're talking about this is because there's just our societies become really susceptible to, as Kevin likes to call them, microwave actions, or I forget what you something of that nature, where we want something instantly, right? We want to change our behavior. We want to take a secret approach, a 1 through 10 step lesson that allows us to, you know, get to where we want to be, but unfortunately, there is no quick approach when it comes down to behavior change. The thing about it, like, and what actually blew my mind, I used to think that it took somewhere between, 20 and 30 repetitions. I've heard 21, I've heard 24, I've heard 28 repetitions in order to make something become a new behavior or habit, right? So for that behavior to become a habit. Latest I heard is there's some research coming out of London that says it could take up to 120 repetitions in order to make something a habit, right? So that's pretty crazy. That's like a lot of repetitions to actually get something to be a habit. Now, here's the problem with it. Most programs that require people to change their behavior, or most approaches, usually enlist multiple things changing at once.
Mm.
And think about that. Like, you have to do something 120 times potentially to make that behavior stick. How likely are you going to succeed if you're changing three, five, shoot, sometimes 10 things at once? Is that a probably like a high probability? Like, for example, there was a very popular program, 75 Hard, that was, implemented this year, and there many people followed it. And it's a very, very restrictive approach. There's so many different things that you have to do for 75 straight days. Some people have succeeded. Very small portion of those that have started succeeded. Yes, there's anomalies. Yes, people can push through. But the likelihood of an average person starting that program and finishing all 75 days is small to none, very small percentage. So that's not the approach, right? What we teach is, when we teach behavior change with Perspective Force, with Kevin and I, when we put that concept into sustainable change, humanly sustainable change, we focus on a 10% change at a time. Some people will say, oh, change 1% a day, whatever. We just focus on 10%, something that you can change in your life, irrelevant of circumstances, at a pace that you can sustain no matter what happens. Right? So that's a very basic principle that we focus on when we work with people. Is we say, okay, let's look at the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish. Now let's come up with some actions that you have to do. You have to commit. Remember, inputs, we're committing to inputs, not outputs, right? It's an action that you're going to go and take a walk, not the output of you losing 10 pounds, right? Behavior changes through actions, not outputs. So person may come into me, this is how it usually works in coaching, and I'll say, okay, we're going to commit to walking, right? That's what you want to commit to. And they'll say, yes. I'm like, okay, so how many days a week do you plan on walking for the next, say, 4 months potentially, right? If it's 120 days to change, we potentially have to do that for 4 months. I realistically will be stuck with 3, but there's different researchers out there. And a person will come in and they'll say, I'm gonna do this 6 days a week. That's usually the response that I hear. 5 days a week, 6 days a week. I'm like, great. I'm really excited about the commitment level that you have right now. However, we are gonna cut that in half, and we're gonna say a minimum of 3 days, right? So you may have weeks where you walk 6 days a week. And if that is every week for the next 3 months, fantastic.
Mm.
But the win, what you're committing to, is a minimum of 3. So if anything in life happens, your kids got sick, something got crazy going on the weekend, you just have a busy week, you can find a way to get 3 walks in no matter what, right? And for somebody, this may be as low as 1 or 2 times a week initially, right? Because we're looking at their life, and I sat down, I did a discovery session with them, and I figured out this is everything that's going on. Based on everything that's going on, they may only be able to squeeze it in twice a week, and that's it. That's the max. Guess what? That's what they're going to commit to. If they can do more, great. If they can do more, then we're not going to go below that number, or sorry, above that number. The point is, at the end of that 3 months, irrelevant of what happened with the hit 6 times or not, they need to hit that 2 to 3 times, whatever we committed to, and then they're going to feel victorious. And that
Mm.
feeling of victory, that feeling of accomplishment and positive self-talk that's going to come from that, is going to lead them to want to do that action a lot more, because they feel like a winner when they're doing that. That's the reality. If you feel like a loser when you're doing something all the time, you are not going to be consistent with that behavior. So in a high level approach, this is what we do when we work on behavior change, right? Commit to the smallest possible outcome, right? That you can do no matter what. Like, there's many, I'll give another example later on too, but what are your thoughts on that, Kev?
First, want to do a shout out to Pastor Chris and Sharon. Glad to have you this morning. Appreciate it. Look forward to your comments. Behavior change is an interesting thing, and we've been about it for a long time. And indeed, making initial first steps rather than trying to make radical change, turn our lives upside down or whatever, is so important. Because, first of all, most of us come into any kind of effort like this with a question mark of whether we have what it takes to do it. So we kind of got a loser mindset a little bit coming in. And so setting the target or the goals in such a way that we can actually achieve them and overcome that's so important. And the second thing is that it causes us problems with behavioral change is that we are trying to change to a behavior that is not in congruence with who we are. We are trying to become somebody or something that we're really not designed to do. So, being aware of who you are and who you're designed to be, and your talents, your giftings, your strengths in particular, being aware of those things make a difference. Because if you're going to make a commitment towards something, find a way to make that commitment in an area of strength. Because if you choose to move in a direction of behavior change, but you are changing into an area of weakness, then the likelihood of your staying with it is going to be more difficult. So that awareness of ourselves is important. We again, this 5 easy steps, the whole process like that, these formularized approaches, as Anton observed, the success rate is small. And if you look at different approaches, about 30% is the best it gets across general population when it's not done in a healthy fashion. If it's a one size fits all, what I have observed is about 30% of the people will have a positive outcome, but the rest of us will end up going, oh, well, here I go again. I've tried this 1,000 times and I'm blowing it again already. And so setting up an initial place of movement and doing so, even if it's one step at a time, that's significant. It occurred to me when we were starting that maybe to look at the concept of inertia. The hardest part of getting an object moving is overcoming the inertia involved. And so getting that first bit of movement is the important part. And so setting a goal of a realistic goal of that movement becomes important. Once it gets rolling, then you can increase the amount, add effort, whatever, to make it roll better, faster, what have you. So real important that as we talk about behavior change, set a realistic goal and do so in an area of strength for ourselves so that we have the best chance of overcoming that inertia in regards to change. Welcome, Zaid. Is anyone else having difficulty hearing us this morning? I hope we're not experiencing technology issues on our end. If we are, let us know, because I suspect not many of you are good at lip reading. So let us know and we'll see if we can figure it out. So what's the stress that comes from behavior change, Anton?
Honestly, it's not so much stress of like the stress that we think about. It's inefficiency, right? Like efficiency is one of the controllable aspects of stressors in our life, right? When we and Kevin come into an organization or to a group of people, we take a look and we see, where are we inefficient? Where are we expending energy that we could be using elsewhere, right? And energy spent on items that are unsuccessful over and over, while at the same time hurting your mental health because of lack of the success there. That's very stressful on us. That creates a ton of stress that doesn't need to be there, right? It's because we're trying to take these, sprint approaches to marathons. We're trying to train for a marathon by doing a bunch of sprints, and it's just not working. It's not going to work. and you are already as busy as you are, you already have as many things going on as you do, finding the right approach is key. It's better to start slower, it's better
Mm,
to maintain slower, but it's better to actually finish what you started than these up and down things, right? And there's so many different analogies that come to mind over the years. We're coming to New Year's resolutions where a lot of people are going to have
mhm,
weight loss as a New Year's resolution and stuff like that. And what I've seen over, 13 years of health coaching now, I've seen these spikes and drops for years and years and years with clients, with people that, I've met and just talked to. And people, if I had a graph, I would show where it's a spike, right? We gain weight, then we go on a diet, we lose weight, we gain weight, we lose weight, we gain weight, we lose weight, because we can't sustain the diet, we can't sustain what we're doing. We're taking this all or nothing approach that burns us out and makes us binge afterwards. But if you look at that graph in long term, you see these spikes and drops have a vertical curve, right? The slope is still a vertical increase. So what it's saying is every time you spike and then you drop, your drop ends up being slightly higher than your previous one,
mm,
right? And consistently you keep gaining weight because you're never really solving root causes. You're just
mm,
doing these fad diets, you're doing these quick, hardcore things, and then you end up hurting yourself in the long run, whether it be hurting your metabolism, whether it be hurting your mind, your behavior, your ability to sustain something, and it's not helpful. Right? Kevin brought up some percentages. I go by slightly different percentages, but still the point remains the same. Like I've always taught people, and this is from an old study, so it might have been updated now, but um, 85% success rate if you have one change at a time, right? So you're 85% success likely to finish what you started when you're changing one thing at a time. When you add two things, you're going to 35%, right?
mm,
When you add three things or more, it's less than 10% success that you're going to actually be able to do this. Take a look at average changes that each of you are doing, and ask yourself, how many things am I changing right now? And be
mm,
realistic, because if it's like, okay, I'm going to start meal prepping, right? That may seem like a one change. It's not one change. That
mm,
requires you to grocery shopping at the same time. That requires you actually writing down and having a meal plan. Then it requires you to change how you cook and then prep cook and all these different things. It's not one change. So if somebody comes to me, for example, and they're like, I want to be able to meal prep. That's something that's my goal for 2023. I'm like, great. Can you just make sure that for now you start to meal plan? Meaning
mm,
that you just come in and you write down what you're going to eat every single dinner, right? Notice I didn't say breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're just going to
mm,
prep your dinners, and that's it. And I don't mean prep, like plan. I'm going to write down on a Sunday, I'm going to get conditioned into having a
mm,
Sunday night time where I sit down and I fill out my meal calendar, and I start to create success by having every one of my meals thought about in advance. And that doesn't mean they're prepped in your house. It just means that okay, on Friday I'm going out and I'm gonna have some time with my friends. Nobody said you can't go out. Nobody said you can't do things, but you need to think about it ahead of time. Be prepared and be like, okay, where I'm going is going to be a really tough place for me to say no to some bad things.
mhm,
So I'm gonna make sure that I'm not gonna be like a person that's a weirdo and not indulge at all, but maybe I'm gonna eat healthy things before I go out so I'm not hungry. I'll munch a little bit with my friends or my colleagues or whoever I'm going out, maybe even have a drink or two. But I'm gonna be in control because ahead of time I thought about what's the least bad option there, right? Not about a perfect option, not about the best option. It's just the least bad option that's available in the environment. Now take a look at what happened come next week and you're planning again and you're reflecting. So you're reflecting back and you're thinking about this, so like, oh, Friday I didn't do great. The other way around, if you didn't plan that and you just showed up, that Friday would have looked a whole lot worse had you not planned it ahead. So
mm,
you did bad, but you did bad without control. So
mm,
now the outcome is slightly worse, but on top of that, you're beating yourself up because it wasn't a victory. But now,
mm,
if you planned to be a little bad and you allowed yourself that break because you were good the rest of the time, you still feel good about that week. It's a win that continues to your motivation into the next week to continue to improve and do better. So, as an example, breaking it down into just that, then getting to every meal is planned, then getting to a place where, okay, now I'm prepping some light things. Like I may cut up some veggies and things like that. I'm gonna
mm.
But the whole point is, over time, it's this process where slowly adds behaviors. We're not trying to change them all at once. And that's how we create long lasting change in health. But that doesn't go any different for life, right? If somebody wants to be a different leader and they want to change different things about themselves with their teams, well, guess what? We're not going to do all these things at once. We're going to start with consistent one-on-ones. Your job is executing at one-on-one for the next 3 months with these people and see how you do, collecting data. And then we're going to grow from that. We're going to add things in. But you can apply that example across the board anywhere.
Well, and to continue on with the example of weight loss, being overweight is the symptom. It isn't the cause. It is a symptom. And what we have to begin to do is look for the root causes, because being overweight can have physiologic root causes. It can have emotional root causes, even spiritual root causes. So dig down and find it, and then deal with one root at a time, and just continue to pull that root. Now, my yard, I have a number of big trees, and the root system grows out into the yard. So in the last couple of years, I've been on kind of a mission to eliminate some of these roots, because it's messing up the yard. But the funny thing is you come across this root and you start pulling on it, and by the time you get to the end of it, you've gone 3 or 4 feet. But what you see on the surface is just maybe a few inches. And that's an example of how it is with behavior change. When we start looking at the behavior that we want to change, realize that you are probably looking at a symptom, and the symptom doesn't appear that big, or it seems like a single thing. And when you start digging down and pulling at the root, you find out, oh no, it involves a lot of different things. And like Anton said, one change is in terms of meal preparation and planning. And there are many steps just in that part. And so as we look at behavior change, get to the root cause to truly understand what you need to look at changing. That's where you pick out and prioritize, by the way, what is the first step that you take, because you want to prioritize and pick something that will have the most significant improvement by that change, because that builds encouragement. Plus, it also creates momentum for us to move forward. Let's see. Sharon's got a comment. It says, I am going to do that on Friday for my birthday. As a matter of fact, I did plan ahead of time, and I'm going to eat. Many times I'll bring home half the dinner. I know I'm already going to have dessert, but I'll be okay. Spot on. So Sharon's sharing experientially how the concept of change in regard to eating does work. And good morning, Rick. Glad to have you with us today. Appreciate you joining as always. So, yes, Anton, we talk about a lot of different things in regards to stress and health and all those pieces. And the first step always comes back to awareness and being intentional in knowing what's going on with us. And so for many of us, the very first step that we need to take for behavior change is to choose to be aware of what's going on and gaining that insight. Your thoughts on that one?
Oh, it's so spot on, Kev. I mean, there's two things for it, right? One is awareness of the big picture, right? Like really what you're talking about, root causes and not just symptoms. As an example, like somebody's like thinking, oh, I struggle with eating. I can't seem to maintain positive, nutrition, meaning that I put junk in my body and I don't give it enough good fuel. they may be thinking that it's just because of their choices. It's, something that's more surface level, but deeper than that, we can uncover that there's actually emotional eating involved.
Hmm.
And there's some deep rooted psychological experiences that happen over the years, and maybe childhood, maybe some other places. And folks, nutrition is that deep. I'm telling you, your relationship with food has a lot to do with your food choices. And if you're medicating with with food, if you're trying to, eat your feelings, or, whatever it may be, you're going to have a hard time implementing changes until you really work through some of those past things. That's an example of it. The other side of it is really creating awareness of what's sustainable, and really understanding, like, who am I, and what's realistic for me to keep
Hmm.
going with, right? And then awareness of those things, and setting goals, and then doing it properly, and it really does matter. But one thing I just want to add to all this, and tell people why I came around a long time ago, 10% fitter method for health, and me and Kev built out 10% for 10% better and 10% impact for leadership and life approach. That's similar to the health approach. It's because the number one thing for behavior change, and number one thing for success in any transformation, is long-term consistency.
Mm.
And the key word is long-term,
Mm.
not a couple weeks, it's not a couple months, it's this continuous process of moving forward, not the pace at which we move forward, not the amount of things that we do during the time that we're moving forward. It's the fact that we keep moving forward over a long period of time. And there was a big study done by, I talk about this once in a while. There, I got my certifications through. I'm working on other certification for sleep and stress right now. But Precision Nutrition, they're in my opinion, maybe biased, but the best certifying nutritional for like health coaches and things like that body out there. And they studied their clients, and these clients keep journals, so that gave them good data. And they studied over 1,000 people, and what they wanted to see is they broke people up into three groups. One group is people that are 90% or more compliant, meaning everything they're supposed to do, they did 90% or more, so almost perfect. Like those are the unicorns, right? Then you had your second group, which did about 50% of the compliance stuff. And then you had your third group, which did only 10%, right? So out of everything they were supposed to do, they did only 10%, but they kept doing it, right? For the entire year, they stayed on the program, they stayed on what they were supposed to be doing, only doing 10% of it. The really interesting part, and what made me think about why that 10% is so fitting for the world, is the results, are the results of the people got. The 90% group lost somewhere between 26 and 29 pounds in a year between women and men. Women are always just going to lose a little less weight than men. Sorry, ladies. That's just how it goes. The 50% group, I want to say, lost like 19 or 17, like it was like 17 and 19 pounds. And the 10% group, right? They lost, I think, like 12 to 15 pounds. So close to 50% of the outcome that the 90% group had with only 10% of the input, right?
Mm.
I can live with that. I can take it. Like, realistically, if somebody tells me you're going to be 50% to where you want to be with this behavior change a year from now, if you identify the right 10% of focus, spot on. Let's do this. I'm perfectly okay with it, because I don't have sometimes the other 80 to 90% time investment to give to be perfect. Would it be great if I could? Yes, it'd be great. But is that realistic and humanly sustainable for me to do in my life once I become aware of everything that's going on in my life? The answer is no. I'm going to pick the right 10%, stick with it, and reap 50% of the benefits.
Indeed. Welcome, Rosemary. For those of you that aren't familiar with Rosemary, Rosemary's kind of been there from the beginning, but she's in Australia, so considerable time difference. Thank you, and a Merry Christmas to you as well, and hope that your holidays are great. So thank you for staying up and joining us, at least to say hello. That's great. Thanks for that. Um, well, and I'll give an example in my life. As you know, I've always struggled with my weight because I'm not one of the uh, group of people that has the metabolism that is hot running high performance. My metabolism is more like a camel in water. I can, unfortunately, I can go a long time because my metabolism will get to a point where it just creeps along. The downside is that if I don't make consistent choices, good choices on eating, then it tells. One of the things I know about myself is I like to snack. Okay. And I'm not going to change that. That is just part of who I am. And so then the question becomes, how can I snack in a way that will be healthy? And one of the things that, my uh, tendency will be towards snacking on chips, and been that way for too many years. And what I have found though is I will substitute nuts for a snack rather than chips. And just that one change for me makes a difference. And when I stay consistent with it, it makes a big difference because balanced diet for me is low in carbs, and the carbs that I have should be low glycemic carbs, and focus on good vegetables and lots of protein. And so, again, that's kind of change we're talking about to be successful in making behavioral shifts, is finding those things that fit with us as we are, and then change one at a time. And we've hinted at it, don't change away from, change to something. Okay. Because trying to avoid something gives you an emotional focus on it, and it makes it even much harder to be able to stay with it, because then we've got this emotional focus and it's like we're always trying to get around it, over it, or whatever, rather than, hey, I like nuts, and so I'm going to have nuts. And so uh, let's see. Sharon has a comment. I agree with that because I belonged to Weight Watchers for many years. Every time I lost weight, I'd gain it back. For me, it was because I thought of Weight Watchers as a diet, not as a way of life. When I finally realized it's a way of life, I started to lose a little at a time, but baby steps is where I will get there. I've done this for health reasons as well. Key point: even our mindset. If we look at something as temporary, it will be temporary. And when you finish the temporary period, you're going to be back where you were. And so realize whatever behavior change you're making, if it needs to be permanent, it needs to be real. And so definitely good example there, uh, Sharon. And then Rick makes a comment, was just diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, back on a diet and working out. I did a session with Liz Jones, and the experience has helped drastically with this new challenge. I got off the wagon during COVID. And part of what we have to look at is that, when we make a mistake, that doesn't mean it's all gone. Anton talked about earlier, look for the bigger picture of what's happening. You may go up and down, but as you go up and down, you're on a steady incline upwards to positive change. So don't get so caught up in that time you fall off the wagon or whatever. Look at the overall trend, because it feeds our need and desire for success. And it's about a right mental perspective. Thoughts on that one, Anton?
Yeah, our body fluctuates. Our body fluctuates up and down all the time. I mean, it's a perfect example why I don't have clients weigh themselves on a regular basis, meaning daily. Usually it's tops every 2 weeks. Sometimes it's just once a month, right? Trying to keep all things the same when we do that. Women weigh tougher because of the menstrual cycle. Your body changes and fluctuates so much with water weight. It's not even funny. So trying to time out your weighing session around the same time in the cycle will keep it apples to apples as much as possible. But yeah, you're going to go up and down irrelevant. But do you want that trend to be positive, or do you want that trend to be negative is the question. If you do these all or nothing approaches over and over and over, chances are that trend's going to be negative. If you're doing small gradual steps, even if you're failing from time to time, but you're consistently trying to move forward, over a long period of time, you're going to have a good trend. So that's a really, really important thing. Kev, I think next week we'll talk about goal setting. We haven't done that in a while. There is a goal setting method that we have at Human SOS. And what we'll do is we'll take you folks through 3 pathways, right? We'll introduce the goal setting methodology, but then we'll take you through life example of goal setting, health example of goal setting, and leadership. They're all the same goals, like same process, but the goals obviously will shift.
Just some different examples of it. And so, yeah, good topic. That will be a good way to wrap up and kick off the new year. Great idea. So behavior change, find root causes first. Think in terms of this change is not temporary. It's not, we've been on the topic primarily of diet. If your diet has an initial period of something that is drastic, in a drastic change, you can write this one down. It will fail. If it's based on some kind of dramatic change in the beginning, you're likely going to be one of the 70% or higher that fail as a result, because you're making a change that is not long-term or sustainable. So think in terms of behavior change. What am I going to do that I will do ultimately, assuming that you're making a healthy change, that I'll do until the day I'm done, till I die. We've got to take that approach.
Yeah, it's a daily minimal viable product, right? Like for people in production or marketing or whatever, you have a minimal viable product you're trying to put out. Well, you have a minimal viable commitment that you have. You can go above and beyond it when you feel ready and you feel like it's a good day. But at a bare minimum, this is what you're gonna put out, and make sure you set the. It's funny because I usually tell people set the bar lower than you think you need to. If next cycle you need to build on that, by all means go for it. But if this is your first cycle of change, don't make it super aggressive. Make it realistic. And that first step is so key, because if you walk out feeling a winner, that positive association with yourself and that activity is very, very important. If you don't set that positive association and instead you created a negative association, the likelihood of you wanting to make that a consistent habit is not going to be high. We don't want to do stuff that we suck at. I mean, that's just the truth. And that we do that all the time with our health, right? The other comment is just for Rick's comment. Rick, I feel your pain, brother. Like, it's with your sleep, that your insulin control is just so much harder, right? Like, that's something that people don't talk often about, and everybody's always beating people up with their food choices and things like that. And I'm like, I get it. Yes, we choose what we put into our body, but your craving for it is significantly higher than somebody that gets good sleep. That's just know that right out of the gate, is that unfortunately, because of your sleep apnea, that is causing you to have a harder insulin or worse insulin response the next day, which makes it harder to tolerate cravings. Energy levels are not as good, and then ultimately our insulin sensitivity goes down, which makes our type 2 diabetes happen. Don't fret though. I know that you can beat it. I mean, I've fixed type 2 diabetes in more people than I can count on my hands and feet. And it's just really staying consistent. Carbs are not the devil, right? That's what many people will say, is they're simple carbs are, right? Kevin mentioned the word glycemic index. I'm sure you're familiar with it as a diabetic, but eating complex carbs that have low glycemic index is not a bad thing, especially if it's paired with protein. Right? When we pair things with protein, it stabilizes blood sugar. Our blood sugar doesn't go up and down as fast, which is important for insulin sensitivity. But just wanted to throw that in there. I feel you, brother, and know that it's some other things that are definitely make it harder on you. So hang in there, and we're always here to help.
Well, and another principle that you got to be aware of, and again, we alluded to it, and this may be a newsflash for some of you, but life is not a straight line. We so often try to do things and behave in ways assuming that life is a straight line from where we start to where we finish. It is not. And therefore, the idea of not being on that straight line, moving towards that goal, and if that causes us to feel failure, we got a problem, because that means we're going to be failing all the time. Life is a zigzag, and in a chart graph kind of approach, it's ups and downs. But don't go in assuming you're going to do this straight line approach to whatever your behavior change is. You're going to move forward, and then something's going to happen. You may not move backwards, but you may move sideways, left or right, and then have to come back to it. And so set that expectation realistically going in, and make plans and goals based on that concept. Give yourself room for, yes, I'm going to not be perfect in this process. And when we allow for that, we avoid the unrealistic expectation and the additional sense of failure, because when we go moving along and we take a turn to the left for a bit, it's not necessarily a failure as such, or back up. It may be a failure, but it doesn't make us a failure because it happened. It's part of the journey, part of the process, and you have to expect that and be prepared for that, and be a part of how you have planned. For example, I'm getting into our next week's topic a little bit, but if you set a goal and you say that you're successful only if you complete that goal 100% of the time, you're going to lose, and you're going in setting yourself up for failure.
And just to reiterate that point, right? If you said you're going to do something twice a week, that's still, and you did it twice a week, you're still 100% of your commitment, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the trick, folks, is that you just make it manageable. It's not 100% of available days. It's 100% of commitment that you made, and making the commitment be realistic from the start is what's really important. I have to drop here, but I just want to leave folks with one final point. You already mentioned it, Kevin. I just want to reiterate it. Don't run from a negative, chase a positive. Right? Like when you want to create change, don't think about what you don't want to do. You're gonna think about it all the time, right? Like it's I was watching a video yesterday, and this monk's talking about, and he's like, "Don't think about monkeys right now." And then he just goes quiet. He's like, "I bet every one of you thought about monkeys because we told you not to think about monkeys." Like, just think about what you want. Think about what you want to do, and replace some of these bad things with good things, and that's the key. Your body has triggers no matter what you do. You can't get rid of a trigger. It's really, really hard to get over a trigger sometimes, because your environment can create those triggers. You can. I'm not saying you can. It's impossible, but it's much harder to get rid of a trigger than it is to replace the response, right? So when you're trying to change behaviors and you have a craving, Kevin, you just gave us an example of this for chips. Whatever created that trigger, whether it be stress, whether it be environment, whether it be, boredom, you name it, it's still going to be there. But your response to that trigger changed from a negative to a positive. To now you're switched to nuts. You still appease that trigger, but you don't have the side effects of the chips that came with it. Well, the same thing happens all the time across, everywhere. So once again, awareness, as Kevin talked about before, is key. Understanding what are my triggers and what do I replace it with? What are these negative behavior triggers and what do I switch the response to? You start doing that and you're going to be a lot more successful than trying to run away from something that you're going to be fixated with all the time. Why? Because we want what we can't have. That's the reality of it. Like, as human beings, we want what we can't have. I joke about this all the time. You probably all had the experience of that some sort in your life, where back in high school or at some point you had a boyfriend or girlfriend, you didn't really like him anymore, but they broke up with you first. What was your response? Come back to me, right? You didn't like them. You didn't want to be with them. But because they broke up with you first, now you want them because we want what we can't have. Well, the same thing goes with behavior change. And that's my last bit for today before I got to jump. So next week, Kevin will stay on. We'll finish the show up real quick. But next week, I'll see you guys here for the goals discussion. Thank you all.
See you, brother.
Bye.
So one of the things that we focus on in doing coaching and doing advising and guiding people is to look at principles. And when you begin to understand the principles and apply them, it makes a huge difference, because the 5 steps that I take to deal with change may be very effective for me, but it's likely that many people it's not going to be, because of the uniqueness that each of us has, and both in where we are in our life and our growth, our environment, all of that factors in. So be sure that you avoid things such as formulas and the 5 easy habits, 5 easy steps, whatever those things are, because they are have a high percentage of setting you up for failure. And I appreciate, I couldn't help but chuckle at Zaid's comment. Zigzag is my cousin. Being that we all have the same origin, Zaid, I believe Zigzag is a close cousin of all of us. And let's see. Zaid also makes comments, says, every time I thought I had a good plan, come to realize it goes sideways. Again, the other challenge that we face is in planning and goal setting. And it's good that we'll hit on that next week. We, again, have formulas that people use for goal setting, but most of those goal setting approaches are assuming that the process is the same for all of us. And another principle is that we are not all the same. We share commonality, and without any doubt, we have certain commonalities in terms of design and purpose, and that's true. But the majority of us as a person is unique to others around us, even family. And so you've got to go in realizing that you need to look at principles, not formulas. And I understand the temptation with desire for formulas. I'm always hoping to find formulas because it would be easier. You get your known variables, you plug them into the formula, and you're off on your way. But life's not that way. Life doesn't work that way. You and I as people are not mathematical. We can't plug into a formula every time to come out with the answers. We have to consider the context of ourselves and be aware of ourselves to be able to successfully change behaviors. And if we have a behavior that is in our life, and this is a core behavior, it's part of who we are, what we are, then, and we push to try to change that, we're setting ourselves up for failure. And so really dig in, find out about yourself. And a lot of the behavior changes we need to make have only partial to do with where we're at currently. You need to find out the history involved in that behavior that needs to change and understand how it originated. Because if we don't get to the source of how it originated, there's a good possibility we won't overcome it. And so we want to really work hard in the area of awareness of ourselves and be intentional about that. And I would even suggest, and this is getting out there a little bit, but there is an approach to addressing life, and I've seen it used in counseling therapy sessions, and it's called a genogram. Many of us would do well to look at applying a genogram in our lives. And I'll give you a brief explanation on a genogram. It's got the same root as genealogy. And genealogy, of course, is the history of our family and who came from where, when, and who died when, and those things. A genogram is looking at our family history, but looking at it from a behavioral standpoint, thinking about mental and emotional, spiritual, even physical attributes that we are a part of. Because, as much as we don't want to accept sometimes, we're a product of our family, and the behaviors from our families affect us one way or another. It doesn't mean that we're doomed. It doesn't mean we can't change by any means. It just means, though, that in order to effectively change, we need that background. We need to realize that, because that's the way that we potentially dig in and find the roots rather than dealing with the symptoms. So as we think about behavior change, we've talked about several principles involved. One of them is, and this is so key, and we repeat it very regularly, but it's important enough, and that's finding the root causes involved in what you are looking at changing. Because much like what a lot of modern medicine does, is rather than digging in and being able to identify the root cause, we identify symptoms and we medicate to deal with the symptoms. And the problem with that approach is, if you've not dealt with that root cause, it's going to continue to come back. The key to real change is to remove the root cause in our lives. And so you have to find it. Okay. Second principle, radical behavior change is not the way to bring about sustainable changes in our behavior. And by the way, we're talking about stress related to behavior changes. The way to bring the highest level of stress related to behavior changes is making radical changes in one big step. That will raise your stress level so much so quickly, it's not even funny. And so as we approach behavior change, remember, behavior change is gradual, it's incremental. There are exceptions, such as if we don't make this change, we're going to be dead tomorrow because we didn't make the change. That's one thing. But most of us aren't dealing with that. Most of us are dealing with things that need to change, but we have time in order to do it, and do it in a healthy fashion. Okay. Another principle involved in behavior change is that we have a cousin, as Zaid referred to it, and that is zigzag, in that we don't go straight line. We will have forwards and backwards and sideways movements. That's part of life. And so as you consider behavioral change, set that expectation that there will be times that you may not progress forward, you may progress sideways. Doesn't mean that you are a failure. It means that you may have failed in that instance, excuse me. And so life is not a straight line. It is zigzag, just like Zaid characterized. So really consider these as you look at behavior change. And think about this. Maybe this will help. Most of us did not start a behavior and make a radical change overnight in a negative fashion. It's generally in incremental steps. And in the same fashion, behavioral change, long-term permanent behavioral change, will take in incremental steps, little bits at a time, until it develops into a change. And what's real interesting is that when we do this, it's sustainable, and those little steps lead us to ultimately what becomes a radical change in a good way. But trying to make that radical change in one step is not healthy, and you're setting yourself up for failure. Let's see here. Zaid has an example here. It's like extracting a tooth. You got to take it out from the roots. Can't leave anything behind. Same with change. You got to go all the way deep into the deepest root and change at that level. Indeed. The interesting thing is about behaviors, though, those roots are not as clearly defined. And that's where the challenge comes in. And by the way, some people are good at finding roots of problems in their lives. Most people aren't. Most people tend to be blind towards the things in their life that are at the root of the problem. And that's why it is a good idea, if you're trying to make change, behavioral change, to include someone outside of you. Now, it could be a friend, it could be family, it could be a mentor, or it could be a coach. I mean, you don't have to necessarily go hire a coach to bring about change. But what you do need to consider is the principle is that it is going to be more likely to be permanent and successful if we get an outside perspective on what's going on. Now, I will tell you, and those know me know I kind of beat this drum a lot, but part of the value of gaining wisdom in our lives is that it gets a closer outside perspective of ourselves than not. If we're functioning just on what knowledge we have in our lives or just based on experiences only, then we're probably not going to see a full picture. So encourage you, if you need to make behavioral changes, get an outside perspective. And one way to start that is to seek out wisdom for yourself. But generally speaking, a wise approach to bringing about behavioral changes will involve someone else for two reasons, actually. One is their bigger perspective that doesn't tend to have blind spots. Second of all, accountability. Having someone that is there and part of this process gives us accountability, and that accountability will help us and encourage us to continue to move forward, because at times life's going to be challenging and we're going to run out of mental and emotional steam, and having someone there that cares enough and has been given permission, by the way, to hold us accountable makes a difference. So behavioral change, especially done poorly, can be very stressful. Done well can lower your stress remarkably. So as you consider behavioral change, approach it with the idea that you want to make changes starting in the very beginning that are sustainable. not changes that are radical. Generally speaking, not successful. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining us today. And we've already got our topic lined up for next week. So I hope you'll get the word out. And if you know people that could benefit from our conversation around goal setting, proper ways to do it, and healthy ways to approach it, have them join us. We'll get the announcement out. And we'll be back next Tuesday at 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for episode number 135 of the Human SOS Show. Thank you, everyone. God bless. Have an amazing week and look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Merry Christmas to all of you. Happy Hanukkah as we move into the holiday season. Thank you for being here. Take care. Bye.